So Michelle leads the Bay Area Discovery Museum's evaluation work to support data-driven decision-making around programming and other museum initiatives. She is also responsible for authoring original research publications and creating and leading internal and external professional development trainings. She has taught at both the preschool and university levels, including a variety of topics in child developmental psychology. She has extensive experience working as an evaluator, helping organizations study the effectiveness of a wide variety of both formal and informal education programs for teaching and learning. Michelle holds a BA in psychology from the San Francisco State University and a PhD in educational psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And joining Michelle today is Britton Romero. Britton is the head of school and community partnerships at Bay Area Discovery Museum. In this role, she supports schools and communities in connecting with Bay Area Discovery Museum through offsite and onsite STEAM-based programming, as well as professional development, partnerships, and co-learning with educators, librarians, and education-based organizations across the learning ecosystem. Britton's career has been focused on informal education with a focus on learning in museum environments. From her very first education job, leading family literacy workshops in public libraries, she has had the pleasure of teaching and working with diverse communities and age ranges from pre-K through adults. Welcome, Michelle, and welcome, Britton. Thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you can start sharing yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Leah, for the introductions, and welcome everyone. We're so excited to be here. See if I can share my screen. And I was just saying before you guys logged on that I'm even a year and a half in, I'm still working with the tech. That look good, Britton? All right, awesome. So this is us. You've heard our introductions already. Let me just fix my screen here. We're really excited to be here. We're going to talk about STEM and early learning. And so we're going to talk about both what children already kind of come into the world knowing and what they do naturally, and then how we can support and facilitate STEM learning and STEM skills. And during this presentation, at any time, you can put questions in the chat, and Britton will be monitoring that, and I'll kind of stop naturally and check to see if there's questions in the chat. And also, you're welcome at any point to, unmute yourself and say, excuse me, and ask a question. It doesn't make me nervous or anything. So just feel free to participate. As Leah said, you can keep your camera off if you want. You can turn it on. We hope you'll turn it on during the breakout room, which we'll do shortly. And we're going to do about 4 activities. One will be in a breakout room, and others will just be all together. And so we're hoping that we can all interact that way, and just ask questions as you see fit. So we are from the Bay Area Discovery Museum. You guys have your cameras off. If you know how to use the reactions in Zoom, maybe you can put a little thumbs up or smile or something. Has anyone been to Baden before? Anyone? A few, not many. We're far away, kind of hard to get to. So this is a picture from our site from Lookout Cove, which is a play area. We have this great view of the Golden Gate Bridge right on the north side of the bridge in Sausalito at the base of the bridge there. And our mission at the museum is to transform research into early learning experiences that inspire creative problem solving. And we do that in a number of ways, but one of the ways we do that is through looking at research, what's out there, what do we know about what children can do already, and how can we help support them. And we use the information we find. We often write position papers or white papers, and we use that information to inform our programs at the museum, both the exhibits on site and the school community programs that we offer, including this one. And so we really look to design our programs to tap into children's natural drive and curiosity to make sense of the world around them and recognize their potential to shape the world. These are just some of the publications that we have put out. All of our publications are available for free online to download. And we'll put the link in the chat later. I have it queued up to give you later if you want. And I think you're also going to have, Leah, I'm not sure, they're going to have access to the slides too, where the URLs will be. And yeah, I saw you unmute. Is that true?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, okay, great. And so today we're here to talk about, what we're going to talk about today is based on the paper on the far right of the slide here, The Roots of STEM Success. So if you're interested and want to learn more and hear more about the research or read more about the research, you can go look for that paper after. So STEM, this STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. Just curious, when you hear STEM or when you hear science, technology, engineering, and math, how it makes you feel. Again, maybe it'd be fun if you want to click on the reactions in the Zoom screen. There's like the simple reactions you can find, or if you click on the 3 little dots, you can get more that kind of look like what you would see on your phone with the full selection. How does it make you feel? I see a party hat for Tiffany. How do other people feel when they see STEM? Feel cool? It feels cool. A little worried, maybe, an open mouth. Books I see. Big eyes. Yeah, so I mean, what I like to ask is, I think it's like really mixed, right? Like some people feel super comfortable and excited about it. It's like a party, and other people are like, I don't know, it's not for me. So that's why we're here. We want it to be for everyone. We want everyone to feel comfortable in their STEM skills. Of course, my technology skills are a little in progress. So STEM is transforming our everyday lives. It's really difficult to think of an aspect of our lives that STEM does not touch. Communication, transportation, healthcare, food, money. And a lot of our biggest challenges in the world today are really STEM related. So how are we going to get clean water? What about carbon emissions, curing diseases, or creating vaccines? All require STEM-based solutions. STEM understanding can no longer be held by just a few, select people, but really we think that all children need the foundational thinking skills to succeed in a STEM-driven economy and world. And so this doesn't mean that children need to go into STEM fields, but really just to even be consumers, right? Like to decide if you're going to get the vaccine or not, you really need to understand the science and how that works, right? To understand issues around clean water, STEM plays a role in that. And so it's about functioning in a safe way in society and making decisions about your life. And STEM could also be a career path. And so why else does early focus on STEM matter? So we think that all children really need the underlying thinking dispositions and knowledge to succeed in this STEM-driven economy and world. And research tells us that early experiences that children have builds their brain architecture and lays the foundation for lifelong thinking skills and their approach to learning. And so this is really important. Again, like I said, not just for understanding STEM fields, but really for success in all of school disciplines. What we find, what this chart is showing you, is that children spend only about 15% of their time in school. This from K to 3 anyway. And the rest of the time they're outside of school. And I know a lot of you are informal educators. And these informal learning spaces are really being recognized as a missed opportunity to deepen children's STEM learning. Most STEM learning spaces are in middle school and high school, and most funding for STEM education is really tied to workforce development and later years of schooling. And the community resources and out of school learning and the pre-K has really sort of been lost in the shuffle of STEM learning. And we really want to highlight the importance of focusing on STEM learning in the early ages. So the paper that I mentioned a minute ago, that Roots of STEM Success, has 6 key findings. So we're going to go through each of the 6 findings, and I'll tell you a little about them and give you some examples of research that led us to those findings. So the first one is that STEM thinking begins in infancy. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that real STEM learning doesn't happen until children are older. And this really could not be further from the truth. Even before their first birthday, infants are capable of making inferences, of drawing conclusions about cause and effect, and really reasoning about the probability of events. So when we talk about causal learning, this is, how one thing caused something else to happen. And not so long ago, researchers in child development and psychology believed that young children were really pre-causal. But research shows that starting in infancy, children develop and test what we call intuitive theories, like, you have an intuition about how something works, much like scientists do. And so this slide is showing images kind of depicting a study. And the study is asking children to figure out what a blicket is. And this is one classic study that researchers use to investigate how children reason about cause and effect. And so what it is, it's a machine, and here it's shown as just like a little block that plays music when certain objects are placed on top. And the ones that play the music are called the blickets. So children are shown a set of blocks, and along with different patterns of evidence, they kind of see which blocks, which are blickets, have the causal power to activate the machine and play music. And researchers track how children develop theories, how they revise theories, how they make predictions and test hypotheses. And they find that children as young as 2 can systematically reason about these causal patterns. And we're going to hear about the blicket machine later because it's used over and over again to really drill down on children's scientific thinking. And then with regard to that statistical thinking that I mentioned, that statistical inference, children also have the ability to reason using statistical inference. So we talked about cause and effect, and now we're talking about statistics. I know some of you probably never have taken a statistics class and you're thinking that seems crazy, but children can do it too. And what we're talking about is generalizing from a sample to a full population, or vice versa, when you see something out in the world, and then how to make a conclusion about how it might work. And so this is a graphic from a study, or depicting a study, it's not their graphic, we created it, by Zhu and Garcia, and really capitalizes on infants' tendency to look longer when something surprises them. So if you show babies little scenarios, whether they're real or in video, when something surprises them, when they don't expect it to happen, they stare longer at it. And that's one classic way that we do research with babies. And so in this case, we show babies boxes like you see on the bottom, either containing mostly white balls or mostly red balls. And then the experimenter will pull out balls from the box. And the experimenter pulls out 5 balls, which we call the sample, from the box, which in this case is the population. And they measure how long the babies look at the 5-ball sample. And what they find is that infants, 8-month-olds, look longer at the sample of mostly red balls when they're pulled from a mostly white box. So that little picture on the left here. So the picture on the left, you can see it's mostly white balls, a few red balls. And the babies seem to be surprised when you pull out 4 red balls and 1 white ball. And these studies are done over and over, really suggesting that babies have expectations about what should come out of that box. And that is a surprising finding for them. Actually, before we do this, I'll stop and ask if there's any questions so far, because we're going to do an activity. Britton, do you see anything, or does anyone want to put something in the chat, or you can turn off your mic? All right, so we're going to do our first activity, and we're calling it Investigating Simple Machines. So I don't know if you're in your office or your home, wherever you are, we're going to take a minute or two now to find what we're calling a simple machine, or really any object that you can explore. And anything can count as a simple machine. We want you to find something around you that you can really observe and be curious about. And so it could be, as well, I was saying to Britton that I was using earlier, I have an AirPod case here. You could use a pen. You might have, a mug that you have a beverage in that, has a lid with different parts. Just really anything that you can observe and explore. You can stand up and walk around. I'm going to put music on for about a minute or two, and then we're going to come back together, and we're actually going to go into breakout rooms and talk about our simple machines. So take a minute or two to find your simple machine. And how about when you find it, when you have something and you're ready to go, maybe put like the thumbs up in your little screen here, so we'll see that you're ready. All right, go find something. All right, hopefully everyone's ready here. I only saw a few thumbs up. Just gonna say in advance, it's hard to tell when people have their screens off, and it's definitely gonna be more interesting and informative for everyone if everyone participates when we go into the room. So hopefully everyone's ready for that piece. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into breakout rooms, and we want you to really kind of step back and examine the object and really try and figure out how it works. And just think about all the parts and all the pieces. I have some questions here, and I'm going to put them in the chat now, and then I'll try and put them in the chat again when we're in the breakout rooms, because I know they disappear. So what does the object do? What are the parts of the object? How do they each play a role in making the object work that you have? And think about the questions that you're asking yourself, and think about which things are obvious about your object, which are more complicated, and maybe do you have any ideas about how you can make the object work better? So these are just some ways to get you to start thinking about how your machine works. All right, so Leah, are you going to put us into rooms? We're just going to go into 2 rooms, and Britton will be in one room and I'll be in another room, and we'd love for you to talk about your machines. I think we're all back. I see Britton. All right. Well, Britton, did your group have a good conversation?
We did. It was wonderful to have folks jump in from all different environments. Some people were sitting in machines, in fact. So
wow.
It was great to hear from folks and see everyone's faces.
That's great. Let me just make sure I'm sharing the correct screen here. You guys are seeing the slides, right, Britton? With the questions? Great. Yes, my group, it was wonderful, and we got cut off with me rambling on. I love the variety and the range of machines. We talked about, it can be a simple tool. Someone had something as simple as a measuring cup, but she talked about the lines on it and how children might explore that. And then, things that were much more sophisticated with more parts. So my group is interesting because everyone was sort of talking about it from the viewpoint of a child, which I think is great. We took the lens of a child. And I think it's what we hope that you see from this activity is that there are so many things that we can explore that we might just even take advantage. And babies and young children are doing this all day, every day. They're trying to figure out how everything works and why everything does the thing that it does. And so one way that we as adults can support children's early causal reasoning is to have them do these intentional investigations, right? They can look at simple machines or any functional tools around us or around them at home, in the classroom, everyday items, can openers, doors and hinges, pens and pencils, scissors, someone had a stapler in our group, or they can be things like technology, like the photo here, taking apart technology and seeing how it works. Let them find something they're interested in, right? When their natural curiosity comes up, and ask them questions, and they'll be practicing these really important observational skills that people in the STEM fields do, and they'll be working on their causal reasoning skills.
Michelle, I just wanted to add, that's really interesting what you said, that so many of the people in your group were talking about it from the lens of being a child and naturally curious. A couple of times within our discussion, it came up the idea of a user manual or the instinct to have someone show you how to do something, or even in places like that, maybe that frustration around, I don't know what's going on here. And so the instinct is to have someone tell you or show you how to do it. So that kind of led to that discussion of those opportunities to really have space and time to explore. And that reminded me of an activity that we offer on one of our school and community programs, the Try It Truck, where we have these tech objects, machines of all kinds that have been donated that students can pick apart, even with tools to take apart and get to explore. And maybe some people have that opportunity all the time, like tinkerers, but some people may not normally have that experience. So providing those opportunities being so important.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Britton. I think that's true. And I think those of you who are teachers or educators in the group might have experience with that, right? You might ask families to donate things that don't work anymore, right? To your class, and so that children can do these explorations. That's one way to do it. Or if you're a parent at home, if you're mostly as a parent and you're thinking about how to interact with your own children, that's something you can do too. You can save old things, old technology that doesn't work anymore, too, and let, as children get old, if you have a keyboard, I just happen to have one sitting here that doesn't work. My son left me, if you can have them take it apart too. You can go that next level and have them take it apart like they're doing here in the photo, which is fun. Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for participating. I really appreciate it. So finding two. Is to become strong STEM thinkers, children need to play more. Play is really at the heart of learning, but time for play is jeopardized as parents and educators worry about academic success. And what we know from the research is that we can't take away play. It's really, really important, and really powerful learning comes from play. And there's several types of play that researchers talk about. And the research that we've done suggests that powerful learning comes from all types of play. And so on the slide here, you'll see just 3 basic types of play that we talk about. So first there's pretend play. And this is, when children make something up and, engage in, fantasy play. And one skill that really comes out of pretend play is this skill of counterfactual reasoning. And this is the type of thinking that supports scientific inquiry. So what would happen if I did X? In pretend play, that's what a child is thinking, right? I am pretending to be a cashier at a grocery store, or I'm pretending to be a doctor, or I'm pretending to be a parent, or a teacher. So what happens if I do that? That thinking of, I'm not me now, but I'm going to be something else. And that's really, really important for children to think about these different scenarios, or even, worlds that don't really exist if they're into Star Wars or fantasy worlds, right? And what research shows is that children who engage in pretend play do better on measures of counterfactual reasoning, sort of that what if reasoning, which is really important as a scientist. Another type of play that's really important is free play. And this is just that exploratory play where children are trying to figure out the world around them. And what we know is that we should encourage a lot of free play. And what we have written here is that it's also important for adults to prompt children to explain their play and their discoveries, not to butt in all the time, but to, kind of strategically ask questions about, what's going on with their play and how it's going and what they're learning. And a third type of play is called guided play. And this type of play we know is really important for content learning. And so this type of play, adults usually have a learning goal in mind. And they might, as if you're an educator or even a parent, you might put out materials to facilitate that learning goal, and then use questions and prompts as children are engaging with free play with those materials. Asking questions like, I wonder, or can you tell me why? Those kinds of questions. And we're going to talk a little bit more about free play and guided play. So with regard to free play, what the research shows is there's this really powerful relationship between explanation and exploration. And there's a researcher, I don't know, last name Lagare, who does work with really young children and a lot of research, especially with the ages of around 2 to 6. And she shows them something like the Blicket machine again. So light boxes and sets of objects. Some objects make the boxes light up. And what she found is that when children observe inconsistent events, so objects that look like Blickets, that look like they should light up the box, but they don't act like one, they tended to play with the objects longer and conducted more experiments, right? They were trying to figure out why that happened. So when something was sort of surprising and didn't work as they anticipated, they really explored that object longer and did more experiments. And when the experimenter asked children, why did that happen? And gave them time to play again, children really continued that exploration. And so when children observe conflicting information, they're driven to explain that inconsistency, and it in turn promotes that exploratory play and discovery and learning. We also know that guided play is really effective for teaching and learning. And research highlights the important role that adults can play in scaffolding children's learning through guided play. So guided play combines elements of free play and also direct instruction. What we do here is adults initiate the learning process and they kind of constrain the learning goals. And they allow children to maintain some sense of control about their learning with that exploration that they can do. And so it's this balance of structure and freedom that makes guided play really successful for a range of educational outcomes. And so this is a graphic of a study by several researchers, Ferrara and her colleagues. And parents and their preschoolers were put into one of 3 conditions. The first condition on the left-hand side, they were given a set of blocks, kind of Lego-ish blocks, and said, play with these blocks, 10 minutes. In the second condition, which was the guided play condition, they were given the blocks and a set of cards that kind of similar to see here, kind of like, if you get IKEA furniture, pictures, but not real instructions. And then the third condition was they were given pre-assembled blocks and just said, play with these pre-assembled blocks. And the researchers gave them time to play and observed the conversations that parents and children were having. And what they found is that children in the guided play condition, so with their parents, with those blocks and the cards, produced more spatial talk than those engaged in the free play with parents. And spatial talk is talk about, above, behind, below, next to. These are really important language skills. Understanding spatial skills and spatial reasoning is really important for science and math. And the research really suggests that the play context impacts the amount of spatial vocabulary that children are exposed to by their parents, and then in turn, the language that they produce. So the children in the guided play condition heard their parents using more spatial terms, and then they in turn were using more spatial terms. Oh, I guess I should stop and ask if there was questions about that. All right. And I didn't say at the beginning, but I'll add it here now that we are going to give you tips at the end too for working with kids. So finding 3, STEM and language learning develop in tandem. And so this really connects to that last piece of research I was talking about. And again, we really want to emphasize the important role that adult-child conversations have on STEM concept learning, on STEM conceptual learning. So spatial language promotes spatial reasoning. So there's really an importance of early spatial skills for children in a range of STEM areas. We know that understanding the spatial language and spatial skills are really important for math and engineering and physics. And research with toddlers and preschoolers shows that spatial language can help improve spatial reasoning. So that spatial language is the first foundation for spatial reasoning. Other research with 3-year-olds found that that 3-year-olds who heard spatial language, for example, I'm putting the winner either in the box, on the box, or under the box to describe a location of a prize. The 3-year-olds who heard that description were more likely to find the object than children who did not. So if the researcher said, I'm putting the prize right here, children were less likely to find it than when the researcher said, I'm going to put the winner in or on or under the box. And so that spatial language is really helpful in facilitating learning. So spatial reasoning is the ability to mentally manipulate objects and shapes in the environment. It's really foundational to STEM achievement, as I keep saying. And again, that vocabulary describing spatial relationships in space, that over, under, next to, between. In addition to that, we also, what goes hand in hand is the shape part of spatial reasoning. And so we're going to do another activity. And I should have said this at the beginning, I meant to. Hopefully you have a piece of scrap paper nearby. I don't know, you're not all at desks and I can't see where everyone is, but if you can get some scrap paper or get your memory going, I'm going to have you look at these shapes here. So I'd like us to go on a shape search. I want you to spend a few minutes looking around you for both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional shapes. And look closely to find both obvious shapes and hidden shapes. So the slide has some examples from the museum to help you get started. We sometimes do this scavenger hunt at the museum for school groups that come, or even parents and children. So on the top row, you can see these flat 2-dimensional shapes, and on the bottom row, you can see 3-dimensional shapes. So take a minute or two and find some shapes nearby, and then we're going to ask people to share and show us what they found. All right, we can get started. People can still keep looking if you want. Does anyone want to show us? I have a hard time finding a triangle in my space, but this is the closest thing I can find. It's a lotion. It's sort of like a triangle here, very skinny at the bottom. Oh, what's that, Irma? Pine cone. Oh, that's your triangle. I like it. That's creative. Britain. Is that a circle or a sphere? A sphere? You're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry. It's an onion. It's a sphere.
It's a sphere. Nice.
I have a magnet thing. It's sphere.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
My phone, that's a rectangle, and the case for the iPod is a square. No, it should be a cube. My bad. That's it.
Perfect. That's great.
Actually, the pine cone in the bottom circle.
You're right. Oh,
Yes.
the pine cone is 2 shapes. I like it. And the pine cone is actually, it's a cone, right? Not a triangle. I said triangle. Yeah.
Pencil sharpener,
I like it.
which is a sphere,
Yep.
and it's not a cube or a cone. And then I found a flat hole puncher,
Oh, yeah.
rectangle, kind of, sort of rectangle.
Yeah, for sure. Rectangle. Definitely. Anyone else want to share? Anyone have something crazy? Oh, no, it doesn't have to be crazy. Yours is showing up like a little plant. Yeah. With your background.
It's an eraser.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Love it. I see Debbie holding something up. A red something. I don't know what it is though. Debbie, do you want to tell us about it? I can't, you're on mute.
It's kind of the top of the air freshener, the cap.
Perfect. Yes. Yes,
So
that's great.
It's a weird shape, but I don't know what's going on with my camera.
That's okay. It worked. Just,
Okay.
it's like when you're looking at something through a camera, you're like, what is that? That's great. And so you can see that there's shapes, all around us. And we can support children's understanding of shapes and spatial reasoning, their understanding and development of geometry and spatial thinking by offering opportunities for them to explore qualities of different shapes and to use vocabulary words about the position of objects in space, right? And so we're combining a few things here when we're talking about spatial reasoning and shapes. So in addition to doing, shape searches or shape scavenger hunts, which you could do at home, you can do outside, you can really do anywhere, right? You can draw something on a piece of paper and take it around and have children do a little checklist or draw their own pictures in if they're little, just looking around the room. You can do things like having them use their whole body is really helpful for learning. So drawing a triangle with your elbow or drawing a rectangle with your foot. Have them put two triangles on top of each other and see how they fit together, and asking questions to really support their learning, like how are these shapes similar? How are these shapes different, right? If we have a cone and a triangle, or even a rectangle and a cone, right? Help them build shape recognition and see how shapes relate to each other. So questions about the spatial reasoning? Oh, I see Britton wrote about cylinders. Oh yeah, more things in the chat.
Yeah, additional great words and thinking about other shapes that we didn't include here.
Yeah, I love it.
Once you start to look at your world and shapes.
Yeah, it's great. And so I was just saying this, and this comes up really with every finding, but it's especially important when we're doing this learning, this elaborative talk, the asking the WH questions and how, right? What we know is that elaborative talk really promotes conceptual understanding. One researcher, Benjamin, investigated the role of elaborative talk or these open-ended questions to promote critical thinking and connections for children. And the research was actually done in an exhibit in a museum, but this can happen anywhere. And so again, parents and their children, parents were with children ages 4 to 8, and they were put into one of 3 conditions. One group was given instructions to ask their children elaborative questions, right? They gave the parents examples of these WH questions. Another group of parents was given guidance on how to build structures in the exhibit. And a third group of parents was given instructions on how to do both things. And what the researchers found is that parents who were encouraged to use the questions, the WH questions, used more of that language and activities and had longer conversations with their children. And then in turn, those children showed better recollection of those activities. And so what research is suggesting is that asking questions is really an important part of keeping children engaged and building their understanding and also their memory of experiences and events. So really important. And then another piece another reason for the importance of talking about spatial, different spatial words and spatial terms and shapes and objects is that increased vocabulary reduces what we call cognitive load. And this graphic, I think we've all had this experience before. Luckily, we're meeting in the morning here, so hopefully we're not there yet. But the person's raising their hand, Mr. Osborne, may I be excused? My brain is full. And so for children, for young children, where they're, as we said it earlier, are exploring the whole world and everything's kind of new to them, this happens a lot, right? Their brain really gets on overload, right? So like a computer, when our brain is working with lots of information at once, it kind of slows down and it makes it harder to learn new things. That slow cognitive processing really impedes learning and slows down that higher order thinking. So if children are constantly bombarded with that new information, their brain tries to figure out how to assimilate it. So what we know is that early exposure to these different words and the language around exploration or language around shapes or spatial relationships, the above, around, between, just continually talking about those things over and over really helps their brain get used to that language. And then as they get older, they they can start to learn about how it all really works together, right? And so younger children, those pre-K children might not really understand how gravity works. We might not even fully understand the full concept of gravity, right? But if you use the word gravity around a young child, you know, like why is my ball dropping to the ground? And you say gravity, they're not going to understand gravity, but they're going to hear that word, right? And they might hear it a bunch of times as a young child. And then eventually, you know, they might go to school and they might hear their teacher talk about gravity as an explanation for how things work. And they just keep building on that term until they understand what gravity is. And so what we know is that early and frequent exposure to words helps children conserve their cognitive processing power, right? So that the first time they're hearing the word gravity in first grade or whenever it comes up, it's not like, what's that word? I've never heard that before. They know that word. They know it has something to do with their ball rolling down the hill. And now they're ready to just focus on what the teacher's saying about how gravity works. The word is familiar and the brain can dedicate processing power to making sense of that abstract data. All right, we good? Are the questions about any of that? All right, you can pipe in if anything comes in, Britton. So finding 4. Active self-directed learning builds STEM skills. This is important. I think most of you in education know now that we're all about active learning, you know. With the introduction of the NGSS, or the Next Generation Science Standards, which really start in kindergarten and on, there's really this opportunity for children to be introduced to STEM in a much more hands-on way that taps into their natural drive to understand how the world works. And with the NGSS, there's a lot of cross-cutting concepts, and these are the big interdisciplinary ideas that cut across all the STEM fields, from neuroscience to electrical engineering. So things like patterns, cause and effect, structure and function, kind of the things that we've been talking about already all morning. And the biggest shift with the NGSS is a call to action to have children learn science and engineering or learn about STEM by doing STEM, not just having the teacher tell them about it. And so there's really this value of active learning for understanding, just like that research study too, with even parents, you know, engaging in the activities with children. Teachers have often been advocating for the use of manipulatives to teach math so that children can concretely see and represent math ideas, right? So there's the little block cubes that a lot of teachers use that allow children to compare and measure and count and explore shapes and patterns while they're building. And that really helps build the math concepts. And what the research shows is that experience in general, just playing with blocks in preschool, predicts children's math grades and achievement scores in junior high and high school. So again, this idea of free play, super important, and playing with blocks predicts later math skills. So it's easy to do and really important. Also, active doesn't have to mean active in terms of in the classroom or at home, but things like going on a hike, time spent outside, has also been shown to increase attention span and boost creativity, which is really important when you're trying to figure out how the world works. All right, we are going to do another little thing here. So this is the picture that was on that slide that we were just looking at. And I want you to look closely at this photo. This is a photo from the museum. It was an activity at the museum. And we want to see what do you notice? What are the children doing? And feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in if anyone wants to be brave.
Are they picking seeds from the vegetables, fruits, and putting them separate with the tongs?
Yep, so some of them are picking out seeds. There's fruit and vegetables you're noticing
They are
on the table.
observing.
Can you say that again, Irma?
Observing.
Serving, is that what you said?
Uh-huh.
Observing.
Observing. Yes, observing.
They're using like science tools, science aids. So they have tweezers, they're using magnifying glass, and they even have trays for them to separate things.
Yes. Anything else people are noticing?
There are a lot of colors around them too.
Mhm.
Also, I mean, there are adults around too, which also helps again guide them out.
Yeah, this is great. So we're noticing there's fruits and vegetables. Those fruits and vegetables also have a lot of colors. The children are using tools. They're using real tools, right? Scientific tools, magnifying glass tweezers, and that sort of thing. What do you think they might discover?
Harmony mentioned sensory exposure, so they're getting to explore with textures. So that might be a part of what they're discovering.
You might discover textures. Someone mentioned colors. Go ahead.
Counting. Size, shapes.
Shape, size,
And also counting.
counting. Yep.
Sorting.
Mentioned strengthening small fine motor skills, which can help with writing later on.
Definitely. Small motor skills,
Shapes and textures.
shapes and texture. Someone was saying counting, comparing. And what kinds of things, what kinds of questions might the children be asking?
Why are there so many seeds in like a single fruit? How does so many seeds get in there? Why are the seeds different shapes,
Yes,
different colors?
yes,
Why the different amount of seeds in all different fruits and vegetables?
yes. These are great.
Or how they grow.
Planting seeds and watching them grow, like somebody else is mentioning. So maybe the correlation between what they're seeing now versus what is the purpose of the seed.
Or where
Can
they
we eat
come
the
from.
seed?
Can we eat the seed? I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. These are great. And so you can see that what to us seems like a very simple activity can really promote heavy, STEM thinking, right? There's a lot of things going on here. The practicing the tool use, or even Britton mentioned, fine motor skills. That's not even related to STEM, right? But there's a lot of stuff going on here. I mean, we can also talk about sharing if they're doing this as a group. But in terms of observation and sorting and categorizing, all of these things are really important for STEM. And I do want to point out that I know here they're using fruits and vegetables, and we talk a lot about, food insecurity, and maybe doing these kinds of activities aren't the best if we're not wanting to waste food resources. But you can do this in the kitchen when you're cooking, or if you have a pre-K class even, or an elementary class, and they could make salad as an activity. And so you can do the same activity and use the food if you're not worried about cleanliness, or you can give them gloves, make sure they're not like going like this, right? But so it can be fruits and vegetables. It can be things. It can be other plants that, if you use the environmental rule, you only pick if there's 5 or more, right? But there's lots of ways that you can use activities like this to really build important STEM reasoning skills. Great, thank you so much, everyone, for great contributions. So finding 5. Oh, there's things in the chat. Let me just make sure. Have you seen anything? Oh, this is just more descriptions. Great. Yeah, great descriptions. So mindset matters to STEM success. And this is really important as adults for us to remember. There's research on mindset, which is the core beliefs about the nature of intelligence. And the research on mindset shows that this is like one of the biggest impacts, or the research on mindset has had one of the biggest impacts on education in decades. So growth mindset is that idea that intelligence can be cultivated and developed with hard work and persistence. And fixed mindset is that intelligence, the idea or belief that that intelligence is fixed or static and can't grow. And mindset influences STEM achievement, and we can shape mindsets. So again, fixed mindset, the belief that a person has a predetermined amount of intelligence, predetermined skills or talents, and a growth mindset is a belief that suggests that you can grow your intelligence with persistence, effort, or focus on learning. And so I want you to think about your own mindset and think about, has everyone heard mindset conversations before, that fixed and growth mindset? Anyone have questions? Yeah. If you want me to explain more about it, but I really want you to think about your own mindset, and if there's areas where you think that you have a fixed mindset and areas that you think you have a growth mindset, because what we know is that people don't think of this as an all or nothing, right? Like, I'm not good at everything, and I don't think I'm good at everything. And most of us don't think like that. We might think that we're good at some things and not so good at other things. And so think about areas in your own life where you have a growth mindset versus areas that you have a fixed mindset. My example is often that I have a little bit of a fixed mindset about my art abilities. I'm not that artistic. I have a really hard time drawing. It doesn't mean I don't, but if someone wants to play Pictionary, I get a little bit anxious. I end up doing okay and being able to draw enough that people can understand what I'm doing, but it's very unsophisticated, right? Does anyone want to say anything about their mindset and areas that might be challenging? Maybe a STEM area sometimes.
Well, for me, can you hear me? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, you know, I grew up in a large family of 15 siblings. And so cooking was never, you know, anything that I enjoyed doing, but all of my siblings seemed to be able to do it quite well. And so my mindset was that I don't like cooking. I'm never going to cook well. And it wasn't until I had my own children that I realized I had to cook. And I learned how to do it and became better at that task. But it was not something that I enjoyed at the beginning.
Right, that's a great example. It's a great everyday example, right? Cooking. And I think that probably resonates with people, because if it's not you, most of us know someone who says they don't know how to cook, and then they learn how to, you know, they know how to cook like one thing or two, and then they get a little bit more confidence. And so it's really a great example. This is a finding that's really important. It's really important to talk about it in the context of STEM. I think we hear a lot of people saying, like, I'm just not a math person. Math isn't my thing, right? Or science isn't my thing. And I think it's really important as adults with children or educators working with children to remember that our own mindset really impacts children. When they hear us talking like that, they're absorbing it. And so we want to really promote and foster that growth mindset. And so we can see here from this graphic that we find that there's changes in mindset from between kindergarten and third grade. So anyone who works with preschoolers or kindergartners, they can do everything, right? You ask them something, they know it all. They're like, I know how to do that. Yeah, I already knew how to do that. You don't need to tell them anything, right? But as they get older, by the time they're in about third grade, we see about 50% of them really developing this more fixed mindset, really in particular to especially things like math and science. And what research shows is that mindset really has important implications for math and science achievement. So one set of researchers found that first and second graders who held a growth mindset had higher scores on standardized math tests than those who oriented towards a fixed mindset. So this is very simple. It's not about achievement, not how they were doing, really just a measure of what their mindset was, and those with the growth mindset scored better. And mindset also plays a really important role in achievement gaps in math and science for women, which I notice that a lot of us here are, and also for underrepresented populations or minority populations. One study with college students gave female college students one of two explanations for gender differences in math before they took a challenging math test. So some students were told that differences in math were genetically based. So sort of that fixed mindset thing about the difference between men and women. And some were told that the differences are based on effort. So how hard you work or how hard you try. And the researchers found that when students were told that the differences were based on effort, they performed better on the tests than students who were told that it was genetically based. And so that's just a really simple thing, just in the moment, right before a test, you tell that to students, it impacts how they work. And so our mindset really, really plays a role. So it's really important. What we know that we can do to help facilitate this growth mindset is to praise effort and process. So the bubble on the top left, you must be really smart. That really promotes a fixed mindset, right? A child who never hears that thinks that they can't do it. Also, a child who does really well and who hears you must be really smart sometimes doesn't try as hard because they're worried about failure. They think that they're expected to do really well. And so what research shows is that it's really important to praise that effort and process. So you must have worked really hard, even if you know that your child or the students you're working with, if they're working in an area that comes easier for them, it's still better to praise their effort and their process. Like, I see that you worked really hard on that test. You were really persistent, and even pointing out things like struggles and setbacks, right? Oh, it was really hard when you were putting that puzzle together. You couldn't find that piece, but you kept trying. Noticing things about the strategies and the choices they're making is really important, and really encouraging children to choose difficult tasks. Wow, you chose a really hard one and you kept working hard, really helps promote that growth mindset and helps promote learning and improving. It's also important to point out that it's okay for students to fail, for children to fail. And even if they don't fully finish a task, wow, you worked really hard. We didn't quite finish it this time. Maybe next time we'll be able to finish the puzzle, right? Yeah, go ahead, Britton.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to tie it back to one of the earlier comments in sharing about the experience of maybe feeling like they didn't have cooking skills, and there was this concept of comparison, right? And I think you can kind of track that in terms of the development or maybe loss of development of a growth mindset as age goes up. In our programs that we offered that were art-based, where you also get a lot of that. I'm just not a creative person. Often we would see students struggling with comparing themselves to another student's work. And so I think this kind of fits in with this concept of praise the effort and the process rather than the product or the outcome is the other way, is kind of another way of looking at it. Instead, there might be that tendency if you see a student, for example, doing a really amazing art piece, it's like, oh my gosh, look at this, versus, really making sure every student is being given attention and support and for whatever their needs are. And looking at the effort they're making. So I just wanted to point out that comparison piece, I think, is really important when you're working with a group of student or children.
I think that's a great point. And what Britton just said is a phrase that educators often use, that process, not product. You might have heard it before, and that's really what it's about, right? Not to have projects that make yours look just like mine, but really just make yours in the way that you can make it, and have children really measure their growth based on their own experience, right? And so what can you do to make yours better? Even if they make a plan to create something or study something or explore something, and they do exactly what they plan to do and they did it just as they intended, you could still say, I wonder how you can make it work a little bit better, right? We talk about that with some of our early engineering programs, like your tower worked just as expected. And could you make it even a little bit stronger? What if there was like a big gust of wind? And so just really having children know that they can keep challenging themselves is really important. One research study I wanted to mention to you looked at how mothers praise their toddlers. And so they observed moms praising toddlers, and then they followed up 5 years later. And what they found is that children who heard more process praise, like good job counting, preferred challenging tasks and were more likely to adopt a growth mindset. So that process praise is really, really powerful. And pointing out that even great scientists struggle is a good way to help children facilitate this growth mindset. what I wanted to mention here, I'm going to kind of like speed up a little because I can see our time and I want to make sure we fit everything in. There was one study with 9th and 10th graders where they heard about famous scientists. This is Marie Curie here on the left and Einstein on the right. And the students heard different things. They either heard about the intellectual struggles of scientists, or they heard about challenges in the scientist's personal life, or they just heard about one great achievement that the scientists made, which they called that the control condition, because we know that these are both great scientists. And what the researchers found is that students who read the struggle stories or the stories about challenges, either of those two conditions, improved their science performance in science class. And the effect was most pronounced for the lowest performing students. So students who were doing poorly in the class, who learned about scientists who had struggles or challenges in their life, improved their science scores. And so just that really valuable influence of adults showing children that, that effort matters. Questions about the growth mindset before I do the last finding? All right, let me zip through this one and we can have questions, hopefully a few minutes for questions at the end too. So the last finding is adults can support, adult support and executive function skills promote abstract reasoning. So great scientists and inventors share common higher order thinking skills. They can reason through their ideas that they can't directly perceive. This is really important. And there has been a really critical question for STEM education about the developmental appropriateness of abstraction and conceptualization. And this kind of ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning too, with the scientific thinking. So abstracting and conceptualizing are two other processes that are really important. In contrast, or contrary to old psychological theories, some of you may have heard of Piaget, recent research suggests that children can reason abstractly based on information that they infer about how the world works rather than directly perceive. Obviously, when children have less prior knowledge and they have fewer skills, they're going to need more support from us as adults and more guidance, probably in the form of asking questions to help them reason in a logical and abstract way. And so asking questions about abstract ideas is helpful. Helping them pay attention to the relevant information is important, and ignoring the irrelevant information. And what we know is that abstract thinking is closely tied to executive function skills, which I will talk more about. So this is an example of categorization when we talk about categorization for children. What we know is that children have an intrinsic interest, meaning they naturally want to form categories about the world. It helps them make sense of the world. And they demonstrate remarkable flexibility in their categorization and a great capacity for inductive reasoning. This is the idea that we come up with theories about how the world works based on the observations that we make from the world, and then we compare them. So sometimes we use perceptually obvious properties to categorize. Things like cars and bikes might be different, but sometimes our perceptions are deceiving. So dolphins look like fish, but they're actually mammals because of the way their biological system works. So researchers like to study when children start looking beyond those perceptual features, the things that they can see with their eyes. And so this is a graphic. It was a whole series of studies that were done by Susan Gelman and her colleagues, where they show 4-year-olds sets of pictures that look, they show like perceptually similar things with things that look different but share a category membership. And so in this case, there's a green leaf, a black beetle, and an insect that's camouflaged to look like a green leaf. And what they found is that when researchers use labels, leaf, bug, bug, children are far more likely to group the items based on the category membership, and they put B and C together than when those labels aren't used. And so that idea that we can help them eliminate sort of the irrelevant features. Also, when children learn new facts about one category member, so for example, these bugs live in trees, they tend to generalize that fact to other category members, even if they don't look alike. And so they're really primed to learn about this category membership. just a quick review on executive functioning. Executive functions are like the air traffic controller, right, of the brain. They help us kind of get everything going here. Self-control, working memory, cognitive flexibility, all really play a role in executive function. And part of what promotes children's abstract reasoning is their capacity to revise theories based on new information. And that theory revision is really critical and really difficult. And it's a skill that should really be a primary focus of STEM education, especially later preschool, early elementary years. So here's an example. So these are things that are alive. We have a tree and a bird. And grandma used to be alive, but she's not alive now. The Christmas tree used to be alive, but it's not alive now. These things are all animate objects. They can move, at least when they were alive. The sun, which is not alive, and it's also not adamant, even though it moves. So it's confusing. And this is a car, which is also inanimate, but we make it move, right? And so the question for these children, these pictures are all to show that the world is a very confusing place, and kids have to figure all of this out and figure out all these different categories. And so one researcher, Zacic and colleagues, looked at children's sort of variation and their ability to revise their kind of crazy theories about the world. And specifically, what point can children understand that a cut Christmas tree and a grandparent and a son are all not alive, right? The first two were alive, but not alive. And the sun can move, but it's not an animate object. And they examined this with 5 to 7-year-olds. And what they found is, after controlling for age and also verbal IQ, and so their intelligence is measured by an IQ test, they found that executive function skills are what predicts the understanding of these really abstract ideas. And so the executive function capacity enables children to revise these previously held theories, inhibit the old ideas and suppress that old idea in favor of learning new concept. The working memory helps children hold all the information in mind simultaneously so they can grapple with these abstract concepts. And then the idea of cognitive flexibility helps children switch their understanding of how the world works. All right, I'm going to skip this because we are out of time. So we really, in winding up, we really want to challenge you to rethink STEM learning for young children, not as separate disciplines, but as a core set of thinking skills and dispositions. And so to help children integrate knowledge across disciplines and encourage them to think in a more connected and holistic way. We think these skills can be built through hands-on interactive experiences that spark inquiry and experimentation. The skills and dispositions need to be developed early in life, beginning in infancy and continuing through at least 3rd grade, and really lay the foundation for the roots of STEM success. And another way to think about it is that curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking are all at the heart of STEM. And the research tells us that they're innate in young children, so it makes our job really easy. These skills are innate, and we can just facilitate them and encourage them to go on. So we have 10 tips, and there's more in the paper if you want to access the paper afterwards. So the first is just to take advantage of everyday STEM opportunities through, like the investigation that we did, right, of the simple machine or objects around you. So through investigations and explorations. This can be at home, in the classroom, outside, anywhere you are. Just take advantage of opportunities to explore the world. And encourage children to notice patterns and changes in patterns, how things work together. Provide time for all types of play, pretend play, exploratory play, and guided play, right? So educators might do that guided play more than parents, but parents, you can do it too, right? We can use that cooking example as another one. They're in the kitchen with you and you have a goal in mind about using a tool or how ingredients work together. Playing alongside children is really important. It's important because it helps you do number 2, right? It helps you encourage children to notice patterns and changes in patterns. And it also gives you the opportunity to do number 5, to ask those open-ended questions, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Children definitely do need time to play alone, and you should give them their space to play alone and really get in the groove of their free play. And playing alongside us is also really valuable. Use conceptually rich vocabulary, right? Remember, we're helping to ease that cognitive load later on by building their vocabulary as much as possible. Encourage children to use their hands, that hands-on exploration, including whole bodies, to problem solve and engage with activities. If you're doing a shape activity, you can have them act out different shapes with their body. That's another way to use the whole body. Remember to praise process and effort, and promote flexible thinking by asking children to come up with more than one solution to a problem. That's great, you solved it that way. I wonder if there's another way we can solve this problem. And then build executive function through activities that promote planning and reflection. And so again, that's executive function, that planning and reflection. It also is a scientific skill, right? To make a plan and reflect on the work that you've done. So on our website, we have so many resources. I know some of you put that in your survey. There's a little screenshot here and a URL about, did I just close my share screen? I did. Let me share it back. I was trying to get you the URL in the chat, which I guess I'm not gonna be able to do because I'm messing up my share screen. So the URL's here. There's educator resources and parent resources. Again, you can access any of our papers, including the Roots of STEM Success, where all of this information comes from. My email's here. I'm happy for you guys to contact me and reach out about the presentation or anything I've said. We also have Britton's email here. If you have questions about the presentation or any of our school programs or visiting the museum. And I know that we're technically out of time, but if Leah's up for it, Leah put all the links in the chat for you. So these links are there, including the PowerPoint presentation, which has the links you can click on. If you're available, Leah, I'm happy to stay on for another minute or two for people who have questions, or you guys can just reach out.
Yeah, that's great. For anyone who needs to leave right now because they have something else they've got to run to do, thank you so much for joining us. And for anybody who would like to stay for a little bit of Q&A, you're welcome to stay on.
Hi, is it okay if I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
I was wondering if you had any other advice or suggestions on how to empower students who feel like they're bad at STEM, because I feel like I have a lot of students in the tutoring program I work in that come to me and they're like, oh, I'm terrible at math or I'm terrible at science. And I'm like, no, it's all about, how much effort you put in. But I feel like I sometimes have difficulty getting them to even want to engage in it because they're just like, oh, I'm bad at it. I don't even want to try. I'm, potentially scared of failing. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions or positive language to use to kind of navigate that topic with young kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Britton, you can jump in too. I think using examples from your own self, right? So again, sharing examples of things that are really hard for you that you, and using that language, maybe not I'm bad at this or bad at that, but, I used to think, that, or you could say I used to think I was bad at it, but then I realized, it was just hard for me, but just saying, this thing was really hard for me. And I noticed that when I worked hard and sort of changed the way I thought about it, it became a little bit easier, or I learned some strategies, or asking them questions about why they think, something is challenging for them and helping them to strategize. And then, they sometimes talk about in relationships that you give 10 positive things for one critical thing. I think the same thing works here. Obviously we don't want to do anything critical, but just that constant praise, wow, you write your number so great. Just finding the littlest things that you can praise will really build up their confidence, I think, and that's really helpful. And so when they come to you saying I'm just really bad at it, you can just say, I think it's okay when things are challenging for you. Some things are, more challenging for some than others, but everyone can learn everything. And let's see where we can start, right? I don't know, Britton, if you have other suggestions based on your experience.
I think those were all really great suggestions. And I would just add, it sounds like maybe you're dealing with maybe some older students as well, older children. And I think that can be a little more challenging because as we saw from that graph, that of course that growth mindset approach does tend to go down as time goes on. And so how can we bring back some of the curiosity and play of the earlier years? So for example, if they're really focused on that feeling that they're bad at something, and all you're doing is focusing on a product like a homework assignment that needs to be completed, maybe that's not giving them the space to explore in a fun and curious way. So are there, games that can be played that might be, that are using those concepts, and then it's not about what are we completing or that something I have to accomplish. It's just that the experience and the time and space to explore.
Yeah, and I just put in a link in for Brainology, and I think that they have some free resources that you can look at too. And this is, so Carol Dweck is the one who sort of pioneered this mindset field, and Brainology, Mindset Works is her organization. And so you can find resources for how to talk with children about it and activities. And there's readings. So I know we even printed one out for my daughter a couple of years ago on how the brain works and how the brain is, the plasticity of the brain, and the brain can grow. And so giving children books depending on their age. I have lists of books too. And so if you want to tell me the age, most of the books I have are for like age 0 to 10. So I don't know what the age range of the kids you're working with is, but I can give you some mindset books that you can look up or get from the library. And I think those are really powerful. Like, as we saw from the research, when children learn that the brain can grow and develop, it really helps. And so what is it's in you're not in your office, right, Britton? With Sophie Thinks She Can or something. I know our Sophie has it on her desk, and that's a book, something about Sophie. For some reason, the exact title is coming to me, but it's, she's struggling with math and science, and, she learns she can. So if you want to send me an email, I can send you books.
Other benefit of that approach especially with older children who might be able to read and explore these concepts themselves is there is also scientific evidence that when folks are able to come to a conclusion on their own, they believe it more strongly. So you can point them in a direction to explore and research on their own, and then they might actually feel it more intensely. So
I put that book in the chat. Sophie Thinks She Can. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I really appreciate the help and advice, and as well as the resources. I'll definitely be checking them out.
Perfect. Thanks.
Oh, and thank you for a great training.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else have questions? Just hanging around.
Okay, it seems like we're wrapping it up. Thanks everybody for coming, and thank you, Michelle and Britton. We really appreciate this amazing training, and be sure to everyone fill out your evaluation